So how can you organize training and work instruction when you have quite a small company and you really don't have the staff to be making documents and complete work instructions? It's a good question that one of you asked me. Let's dive into it. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And in this video, we'll go over a comment that I received on a video I made about a year ago on don't use one-point lessons as a replacement for real work instructions. And then I got the question, but I'm in a small company and we don't really have work instruction set up at all. And I like one-point lessons as a way to communicate between departments. So you do need the communication, and we'll need to instruct basically when our standards change and when you have to do something else. And this is completely valid. In the video on how to build up the instructional landscape, I did talk about it a bit, but probably not enough. So let's go into the role of the one-point lesson and where it really does work in also in small and in big companies. But we'll go over basically how to naturally make work instructions. Because the thing in a small company is actually you rely a lot more on the skill of your personnel, which is often a bit higher, but also standardization is easier when there's only one person doing the work. Well, the way that they're doing it is your standard. And because the same person does it every day, your process will be quite stable. And you will get into more and more problems the more people fulfill the same workplace. So the same process is being run, managed by multiple people, and you still want exactly the same result. Because that, I hope you do agree with me, we want the same result coming from our process every time. That gives us the stability to have a nice and stable product and make sure we perform at the optimum. Because the optimum is only one setting, so to say. It's only one, how does our product look and how is it made? Now, I'd like to, before we go to the board, I'd like to give you a bit of an example. I grew up on a farm, a dairy farm, and my sister is now running it. They actually employ quite a lot of personnel. And one of the things in the milking parlor is that I think they have maybe 10 or 12 people at least who quite regularly operate the milking parlor. Now, in the Netherlands here, we have this thing called a milking exam. You get training and examination in schools, in animal husbandry schools. You can also do it privately. And they basically teach you how to milk. But there are different parlors, there are different farmers, there are different systems. So each farm it's like a family business. And it sort of has their own little things. So their own flavors to a basically standardized system. So what did the industry make? And it's this big sign saying, on this farm, we pre-treat our cows with, and then put a tick mark, paper towels, cloth towels, wet towels, and we use one towel per so many cows. So what they basically took is everyone who did a milking exam or who is trained for a little bit, they will know that you pre-treat cows on most farms and roughly how to do it. But the difference is in which material do we use. Now, if someone who can full out milk on farm A goes to farm B and sees this sign, it's very easy to make the translation. You can take all your basic skills and just switch a couple of the key parts. And there are 8 of those topics on this big board that is at the entry of the milking parlor. And they are the basic flavors of differences between farms in the Netherlands in how we have milking procedures. And when you get into the milking parlor, there is this sign with these cows, they need special attention. So it can often be that in the morning someone else is milking from in the evening, but of course if you need any treatment or care for a cow, it goes on. So you need to communicate between people who do not have a real handover, because there's just a big break time in between the milkings. They don't see each other in person for many days often, or sometimes even hardly ever, but they still work together. So they have this system of communication. And this is basically also a setup for many small factories, small company types, where you rely on a base foundation of craftsmanship. You really don't need work instructions that detail every step of the way. What you need is people to be working the same way. So if the machine forces you to work a specific way, if by on-the-job training you get the result that everyone is working in the same way, these things that are just naturally becoming a standard, you don't need them in a document. Even ISO does not need them in the documentation. What you often see, especially with quality departments, is the argument that ISO forces us to document all of our processes. That is true, but not in excruciating detail. You don't need to put all the steps in there. In fact, no one's going to read that ever, even the auditors. So in this basis, you can have a couple of points that are a bit more difficult, that are either difficult because it's not directly logical in the process with the machine, or because you changed it recently, or you got to the conclusion that by observing, well, this is a difference between our shifts, and you just want to redraw attention to what is the best, the optimal working standard. And in this case, you use a 1-point lesson. Or you can also use the sign with a number of attention points, but when we go into more the industry side, here is where you use standard operating procedures and 1-point lessons. And a standard operating procedure or work instruction, to me, it's almost the same. Some people split the type of document that it is in, but this tells you what to do for a specific process. Now, that means that this one work instruction or standard operating procedure document is it's a nice to have, but it becomes more important when you have multiple shifts and really a lot of people running the same equipment. See, if your people work in one team in one shift and they always can see each other, it's very easy to cross-pollinate a bit and make sure that they basically operate in the same way. And they all correct each other a bit when they see that their colleague is handling the machine in a slightly different way. Oh, well, why do you do it like that? This is much easier. They'll have a bit of a discussion, and it's quite natural. When you have a 5-shift system, then some of the shifts, so some of the colleagues, will never see each other. So it's almost impossible. But even if you have a 2, it's almost impossible to get this natural cross-pollination. But even a 2 or 3 shift organization, people will not be working together. So they do a handover, but in the handover they say, yes, I set up the machine as it should be, or according to standard. And if the 2 people have a different idea of what that standard is, they both will just assume that it's according to their own standard. So you have already a bit of a communication mashup. And the more shifts you have, so the more asynchronously your people are working the same process, the more need you will have for work instructions, standard operating procedures. But as I said, the 1-point lesson has a different thing. So if we make a change, we changed part of our standard way of working. Now, these ingrained habits, they have to change, which is much more difficult because we now need to communicate. People, let's change our way of working. This is now how we operate the line, and we need to draw attention to it. And the attention grabbing part, that is your 1-point lesson. So your 1-point lesson is a small document about the one thing that we want to draw attention to. Now, when we have a small organization and we don't have work instructions, what is a common pitfall is that we start making 1-point lessons about all the parts of our process. So we're basically, instead of making a work instruction with the 3 points, or more often something like 7 to 10 steps in the process, we're going to make 7 to 10 1-point lessons, one for each of the steps, because it's only 1 point, so it's easy to make the 1-point lesson. And then in the end, what you end up with is that when you are going to train a new person, there are at least 10 1-point lessons for the process, because there are 10 steps in it. Then at some point we changed something, so there's an additional 1-point lesson about the change. Maybe we've got 3 changes, it's an additional 3 1-point lessons. Then there's also, the point about safety while operating this. It's put in also as a 1-point lesson on safety. The quality check is a 1-point lesson. And before you know it, basically the instruction, so when a new person comes in to learn how to operate a process, a line, but it can also be how to plan production or make a sales call, they get this mess, this whole jumble of 1-point lessons. And that's basically also the difference between, let's say this YouTube video is a 1-point lesson, more or less, right? You go to college or to a structured learning course, or you pay a bit extra for a real book, a study book, because what that does for you is it creates also the structure. So a course is a number of lessons that have a theme, that have a structure in it, and one video is just a 1-point lesson. And when you just put all of my videos and maybe one playlist of videos, and you say, well, this is how you learn continuous improvement, it's difficult, right? For someone who doesn't have the overview, this way of learning is not optimal. It's very far from optimal. But for someone trying to pick up this one concept that is not completely clear, it is a wonderful way. Or to jar a bit up the memories, the idea of how do we work, get some clarification, ideal. Now, what you will also do is you watch the video and then probably you're not going to watch it again. Maybe once or twice to just get it in and revisit it a bit. But that's also what you do with a 1-point lesson. It has to go away again. This is not going to be the structure in your work instructions that you want. Now, this is all I told you. And from that, the question came, but how to do it in a small organization? I can't just make all the work instructions yet for every process. We don't have the resources to do that. And probably it's also not cost efficient at the stage where you are currently. Assumption. Now, what you can do is these work instructions, we make them by workplace or by process. So our process, our total production, it consists of several processes, right? You have a bit of planning, you have department A, the preparation area, you have the mixing and the cooking area, you have an assembly, you have different processes in your total production process, and each of those processes, they have an operator. And these people, they are in a workplace or a process. You can pick a bit which of the 2 organizations you want, because sometimes one operator does 2 processes. Sometimes you have a process that basically has 2 operators on it, and maybe they even have split tasks. So they have split workplaces. But in general, either on process or on workplace, work-centered place, where you put and where you plan a person, you just categorize it. And you basically, at least, let's say in your document folder system, make the names of the work instructions. So the idea is that you organically grow towards the work instructions, there where needed. We're not going to make a work instruction for everything. We're going to say these are our processes, and any OPL that we write will have to be linked to our future work instruction structure, right? So you link an OPL to a workplace. And then if on the same workplace you make afterwards a different OPL, you again link it up to there. So you link your current OPLs to the future instruction that will probably be. And then, let's say once a year, you combine the OPLs into the work instruction document. Or even if you are not ready to go for work instructions yet, say, let's wait a little bit longer. We start out a little bit with the nightmare scenario I just mentioned, with the 20 OPLs for each process. And I've worked at a factory where when you came in as a temporary staff member, so you don't even really know if you'll be working here in a couple of weeks. You had to learn something like 200 EPLs, and a team leader would check with you each EPL if you had understood it, and you sign it, and it was this whole system of managing over 3,000 one-point lessons in a skill matrix based system where everyone would get a number of EPLs based on their stage in the company and what lines they should be. It was horrible. And that factory also at some point threw away the system, even though they had invested a lot of money in it, and even more time and resources, of course. And they also moved towards one-point lessons are a temporary thing, but they can add up to work instructions. So if you don't have the work instructions yet, at least make, let's say, the folder or the name of what is going to be a workplace instruction, and give the OPL the same starter name with the topic of the OPL behind it. And then once every so many, well, yearly or so, once every so many months, years, you combine them into one document to make it easy for new people. So that is what you also do. When you do have work instructions, once a year, once a quarter, you review the OPLs that were made in the last period, and any OPL that was just a exclamation something changed in this work instruction, you can just toss it away, not a problem at all, because it's already in. Any OPL that was about pay attention, this part of the instruction is poorly understood by many people. What we really mean is this. That is a very big red flag for the hopefully autonomous management team, or maybe the team leader or whoever is doing the work instruction, so making sure that documentation for this process is correct, to rewrite the paragraph. Use the text and the pictures from the OPL to rewrite it so that it is very easy to understand. Any OPL, by the way, that you just use to put some general attention to something, put it somewhere on your OPL that this will be destroyed after 60 days. Just toss it away. And this is a perfectly good way of using an OPL. When you know that you either made a change or that you just want to focus on some topic just for a bit, you make an OPL, but you do not save it. And that is the big difference. As long as you do not save the OPLs, as long as you can just use them as a way to convey your information across departments, within departments, across shifts also, and then when everyone has seen it, you just throw it away, you won't really have a problem. The only thing is, check the reason why you made the OPL in the first place, because probably in the future when someone enrolls in your company or changes jobs and suddenly has to learn a new workplace, then probably you needed the information that was in those OPLs. You didn't write them completely for nothing, right? So make sure that the information that is valuable for future employees on this specific job is contained in the work instruction structure by workplace. And then you can use OPLs, it's no problem, also in a small company. And they don't need to be completely formatted, always the same, but you do need to make how you use them the same. What are you trying to convey? Why is it needed that you put attention to this? If it is just the topic of the week, the topic of the month, which is quite a good practice, when you know that you have a whole bunch of work instructions and basically you train your people and then you don't really want to retrain them formally with the whole work instruction, you can make OPLs that just go through the 10 points, and every month you get one of the chapters, so to say, out of your work instruction, but with the critical points highlighted. It's nice. It's a very nice way of getting focus to just refresh how we work. Those OPLs can be tossed away. But any that you make because something is not going right, because you see that you really change something, change habits, or people are just not getting this step in the process and you need to visually remind them on it, probably you need to save that information for later use to get it in work instructions. Make sure new people also get to see this. Future reference also gets to see this. So to answer the question, yes, please use the one-point lessons. They are a very good tool for communication. You don't need the work instructions to be made just yet, but make the small step ahead of thinking, what are my processes, what are my workplaces, my work centers, and organize OPLs into which are we going to save in the folder of a specific workplace, which are we going to toss away, put it on the OPL. Can be tossed away after 60 days or put on it, has to be worked into the work instruction at some point and then destroyed. I hope that answered the question in a bit more detail than I could do in a couple of lines of text in the comment. So also to the rest of you, if you have questions on the videos that I make, the topics that I discuss, if you're doubting how is this applicable in my situation, please do drop a comment. I'd love to answer things that you struggle with, because that also gives me the more practical examples, the practical ideas of what parts to tell you a bit more about. How can it link to what you are doing, and how can I help you improve in practice? And so if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. For now, I wish you the best of luck with your OPLs, your work instructions, your whole competency management, but also, as always, enjoy the improvement journey.